Well, welcome everyone to the College Admission Lab from Con Lab School. I'm your host, Brennan Barnard. I'm College Admission Advisor at Con Lab School, and I am joined today by our founder, Sal Khan. And Sal is also the founder and CEO of Khan Academy and Schoolhouse.World and Khan World School. Welcome, Sal.
Good to see you, Brennan.
And our guest tonight is Jim Nondorf, who's the vice president. I mean, hold on for this title because this is a long one. I don't know how this fits across his chest, but vice president for enrollment and student advancement and dean of college admissions and financial aid at the University of Chicago. Man, I don't know how
Yeah, I
to.
get some cards for that.
Well, welcome. And this evening, we're going to discuss selective college admission and holistic application review. And so please share your questions in the chat there, and we'll get to as many as we can. And maybe just go in there now and share where you're zooming in from and whether you're a student or a parent or educator, and we can see who is making up the audience. So while they do that, before we dive into questions, Jim, can you just start by giving us a brief overview of kind of your educational and career journey and how you got to where you are?
Sure, I'll do a real fast version. So I am from Indiana. I am the youngest of 7 children, and my parents did not go to college. I was lucky enough to go to Yale, and I played football there and sang. And then, things were different. You didn't get a lot of guidance around careers. So I thought I was joining a consulting company, but it was actually a tech incubator after graduating from Yale. And we took a bunch of companies public, and I became the president. And then I retired and moved to Florida and started a charter school. And then after that, went back to Yale, worked in development for a little while, and then became their first director of outreach and admissions. And then I went to RPI, or Rensselaer, oldest engineering school, great school up in Troy, New York. And after that, I became the vice president at the University of Chicago.
And the rest is history. And you've been
And the
there.
rest is history, I guess.
You've
Yes.
been there how many years now?
Can you believe, Sal? Can you believe this? 17 years I've been the dean of Chicago.
Man.
Time flies.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. And Sal, I know you've collaborated with Jim on a number of different efforts to kind of innovate how students can express themselves in the admission process. And I was hoping maybe you could just start by sharing a couple of those about some of those projects.
Oh yeah, sure. And I will say, not to pick favorites. I have many favorites in the college admissions world, but Jim, I think everyone's in for a treat. I think he's unanimously, most people would say, a unique entity in the college admissions world. No one who will, take this, let's be honest, high stress process, but maybe put a smile on your face a little bit. So I look forward to that. But the projects, Schoolhouse.World, nonprofit, sister nonprofit to Khan Academy. And the whole point is, can we connect the world through learning? The initial idea of free tutoring through volunteers. We had to figure out a way to certify the volunteers. We came up with what I think is a very powerful way of validating that you might know your physics or your calculus or your whatever you're trying to tutor on Schoolhouse. And Jim was really the first, and this was, you can imagine, during the pandemic where all sorts of things, it was hard to take a lot of tests, even traditional grades were difficult. He said, could we use a certification for college admissions? And since then, UChicago was a pioneer, but nearly 40 universities, very strong universities like University of Chicago, have joined this effort. But it was really Jim was the ringleader. And I think, you could ask him, but I think it's worked out really well for everyone. A lot of students who wouldn't have been discovered have gotten discovered. And I think the universities are appreciating this signal because not only are the students certifying their knowledge, but many of them are going on to tutor other students, which you could imagine is a very strong signal, not just of subject matter mastery, but also the ability to communicate, lead, do real service for others. And more recently, UChicago, and this is also, things happen when Jim and I get chat together. We started thinking about this whole notion of how can we, I think everyone wants to see students not dilute their points of view. I think everyone agrees that college, and UChicago has always been about free speech and being a place where, and this is obviously very relevant given what's going on in the news these days, but U Chicago has always really prioritized being a place where you could have ideological diversity, where you didn't have to feel like you have to have one point of view. And we said, wouldn't it be amazing if we can make sure that people don't dilute their points of view, but they can learn to communicate them constructively and in a civil way. And so we created this new program called Dialogues, where we're pairing students with kids who have likely a very different point of view as themselves. It's not a debate. It's really an opportunity to communicate and listen and give each other support and feedback as they communicate and listen and get exposure to truly different points of view. And U Chicago was once again the pioneer, and then there's a handful of other universities that have officially said that they would look at this as part of college admissions, and I suspect many more will join.
Thanks. Yeah, Jim, do you want to add anything about that?
I would only add, actually, one of the great things about the tutoring piece was that we've leveraged it for our the small town and rural students initiative that we're doing with 32 other top schools, and which, because those schools, don't always maybe have the teaching that that they, or the curriculum that they need to get into some of the top schools. And so this program is great to get a certification, that you can do the level of math that we need. And yeah, I gotta say, around dialogues, this is exactly what we need. People sometimes forget that free speech is not just about talking, but about listening. And and as the country has become a bit more polarized, it's hard for kids to have a chance to talk to somebody else who has a very different viewpoint. So, as usual, Sal, you're getting the way, and I'm just lucky to be the happy beneficiary of it in the admissions process.
Well, speaking of admissions process, could you, we wanted to talk about selective admission tonight, Jim, and, maybe you could talk a little bit about holistic admission, because I think it's often misunderstood. And maybe you could just kind of tell us, like, in the simplest of terms, what is holistic admission and why is it used?
Sure. So I'll be really brief, even though I could give 2-hour talks on just this topic. But there's two aspects of it that I guess I would like to point out for the audience. There's that kind of the conceptual aspect of this, which is it's about the whole person and what is that applicant going to bring to campus, and that can be lots of things. It's not just one aspect of who they are. And then the second piece is the more practical side, which is what it really means is every piece of the application is equally important. Around the world, there are many countries where their admission to the most highly selective schools is based on one test. And in the US and at our top schools, it's not one test. And in fact, that test might, we're test optional, but even when you require it, it's one of many pieces that gives us an insight into what is that student going to add if we admit them, because that's really what we're looking for. And then I would just layer on top of that holistic admissions also enables us to have institutional priorities. Everybody doesn't want exactly the same kind of student, even at the very, very top. And sometimes you want more of a particular, you want more engineers, or you want more humanities students. And holistic admissions enables you to have that lens as well.
Thanks. That's really helpful. I mean, Sal, do you, from an educator and from a parent, you have a son that's approaching this process rapidly. Do you think there's what are the myths or misinformation about holistic admission?
Oh boy, there's so many. I mean, I'll tell you some of the patterns that I've seen people. I'm sure Jim has seen 1,000 or 10,000 times whatever I've seen, but I, I think I don't know if this is a myth, but I think it's a trap that people fall into, which is they get so fixated on a name, on a school. And I've seen this in kids applying to college. I've also seen this in, I've seen this in politicians running for president. You get so fixated on the goal that you're almost afraid to show who you are. You're afraid to show your authenticity. You think, and you might even, this is in both of those cases. You might have experts telling you what a perfect application looks like, and you're trying to jam yourself into that. And I can't tell you, and look, even at KLS, I've given feedback, and I'm always willing to give feedback to students applying to different universities. And the number of students I've seen who I think are actually incredibly not only bright but creative and fun kids, with a sense of humor. I read their essay, I'm like, hey, you're funny. Where is it? And they feel like they need to reinforce in their essays the things that are already obvious from other parts of the application, like they're smart and that they're capable. I've seen people, we see this at Khan Lab School, where we don't have traditional ABC, but we have advanced master or mastery with distinction. We have mastery, approaching mastery. And I've seen people get really tied up about, oh, how do I get distinction on this? I was like, and I tell people this, I was like, look, your resume and your standardized test scores already check the box that if you were to go to a U Chicago or a Stanford, or you're gonna, they see, okay, this kid can handle the coursework, probably like 80% of the applicants. Now, you're going to go into category to Jim's of like, what are you going to bring to the campus? Are, what's your joy? What's your real personality? And I know it, and I know that can feel very scary for folks. We're like, no, I really want to go to the U Chicago. And look, you might not. Obviously, it has, I don't know, Jim knows 5-6% acceptance rate, but I actually think you'll have a much better chance of going to U Chicago or whatever, your handful of top schools are, if you really anchor on who you are as a person and show your personality.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Jim, maybe you can expand on that, because I mean, I'm sure you can easily spot an inauthentic application. And what does that look like? What are some of the missed opportunities?
Sure. So to get to follow up on Sal's point about like the other things one brings to campus, like right now, and we talk about this in our info sessions, of course I want smart kids, and 45,000 applicants, and yeah, the vast majority have good grades and good testing. So what else are we looking for? And in addition to like those kinds of priorities of, oh, I want to have this many kids from different states or whatever, I want kind students. I actually think kindness is an underrated, underappreciated, but I am finding from our employers and from like when our kids graduate, they actually want kind students, graduates. I want some kids who know how to give a little grace. I'm tired of who wants a roommate that's going to pounce on them the first time they make a mistake, and students who know how to show a little appreciation, and we talk about this in my sessions. I usually ask the students to hug their parents now while the feelings are still good. Before the admissions process plays out. And I have seen, kids, they create these, crazy community-based, things that they do. And I'm like, were you really that interested in that? Because it doesn't seem to play itself out in the rest of the application. So yeah, I would go back to Sal's comment of a happy student, a student who knows who they are and likes what they are and likes what they do. That comes through so much better in an application than a student who's like a grind, or a student who's waiting to shiv his friend in high school because he wants to be the president of the debate club, or these overwritten essays that were clearly written by a 50-year-old consultant, and or this latest trend seems to be all about like passion projects. I don't even know what a passion project is. I hate the concept of it. I want kids to be who they are, and that's going to be what we want on our campus.
Well, and so for a student going through this, I mean, they hopefully they've identified kind of who they are, but how do they make that stand out in an application? There's a question here in the chat, how does an application stand out among thousands of applications? And like, how do you identify that kindness? How do you identify the appreciation and gratitude?
So the nice thing about applications is you can get, at least for the highly selective schools, we all teach regularly, there's a lot of pieces that kids send in, and you can get that sense of a student through almost any of them. The essays are obviously the most obvious. You can really tell a kid who's kind, or who's just brilliant. You can just feel it in their, the way they write. But I'll give you a perfect example of like the difference between the kind of kid we want who's super smart and the kind of kid we don't want who's super smart. teacher recommendation comes in. You can imagine the vast majority of our kids are really, they're the first one to get the new concept in class. Sal, like there's always that first guy or girl who makes the breakthrough in, a new math concept or engineering concept. And there are two kinds of students. There's the students who are, oh, I'm so smart. The rest of you are so dumb. Why are you all so dumb? Who kind of lords it over. And then there's the kind of student who's like, hey, did you try looking at it like this? Have you thought about it this way? Tries to raise all that. Sal, I know you were one of those. You were number two. I would admit you now if I had the chance. But you're successful and you don't need to come to Chicago anymore. So, but like that's the difference. And teachers write about it. And you can see it in their videos. Like we have an optional video, and I love the ones where like they bring their little sibling along. And then the sibling invariably says something inappropriate, like, you need to be nicer to me, or something like that. And it's funny. And the kid still sent it. And, so that tells you about their personality.
That's great. And Sal, I mean, to that point, how would you like to see the conversation about selective admission, about kind of authenticity shift in both public and in homes, among families?
Yeah, I mean, I think first step is on the selective admissions generally. As Buddha says, attachment is the cause of all suffering. I think one of the first lines in the Isha Upanishad, which comes from the Vedas, which Gandhi said, if all of Indian culture were to disappear and we just preserved the Isha Upanishads, which is like a page and a half or 2 pages, and its central idea is covet nothing. That should be, you can desire things, you can want things, but covet nothing. And I fear that college admissions is probably the place where I see the most covetous behavior of any other place in society, where people get really fixated. And look, Jim isn't one, I think some of the culture around, I think some of the universities do say, oh, look, I think it is good to visit campuses if you have the resources and all of that. But like, we want to make sure that you're in love with our campus. I was like, last year we interviewed another admissions officer from another highly selective university. And I said, look, isn't that dangerous to go to your campus? It's easy to fall in love with your campus, but you have a 6% acceptance rate. Isn't that just going to set up 94% of the kids for a really, so I'll encourage, I think UChicago is a great, I've become one of Jim's proselytizers of the UChicago, of everything great about UChicago. But I also, I tell people that there's many great places. Brennan, you and I have told people that there's no perfect decision. You need to there's no right decision. You make the decision right. And, the flip side of the fact that at least it appears that colleges have gotten a lot more competitive since maybe I was in college, the acceptance rates have gone down, is that there's actually a broader set of universities where you can go and have a really strong peer group, a really strong, faculty, et cetera. So if you have a strong peer group and you have great faculty and you have great opportunities, and there's at least 50 to 100 schools I can think of that start to fall into that category. Yeah, don't get fixated on just one. So that's my first one. You're going to set yourself up for failure if you do. The advice I would give for this is to try to be authentic. I actually think I was very lucky. I think about my own application. I kind of did follow that first advice. I had applied to 4 schools. I did have a first choice, but I wasn't like my life was going to be over if I didn't get into that first choice. I was actually going to be very happy if I got into any of those 4 schools. And when I look at the application, I was just like, oh, they want me to do this. I wrote about a dream I had, and even some of it's like, are you sure you want to answer? I was like, yeah, I mean, this is kind of who I am, blah, blah, blah. And it was kind of wacky, a little bit out there. Not too out there. You have to be careful. Don't try to push yourself beyond who you are. But and in hindsight, it was the right thing. We interviewed the gentleman who's the head of admissions of Berkeley last year, and he said that it should pass the what does he call it? The drop test. That if someone picks up your essay, in the hallway at your school, everyone would know, oh, that's Sal's essay, even if your name's nowhere on it. That's Jim's essay. Yeah, that's so Jim. Um, if you can do that, don't hyper optimize the academic side. If look, I know admissions folks are never gonna like say this is our SAT cutoff score, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're already at the high 90th percentiles of things and you have a high GPA, you've taken a couple of or several rigorous courses, whether it's AP or IB or college level or dual enrollment, you did well in them. You don't have to even do perfect in them. You've already checked that box that, okay, you're going to be able to handle a U Chicago or any other comparable university. And then your best shot is show your personality. And once again, it's not going to be a guarantee. That's the problem. Don't get fixated on it. But you'll have you're going to have your best shot of getting in.
Yeah, it makes me really sad when a student spends all of high school, starts planning kind of with this one thing in mind at the end of high school, and they plan their whole high school around it, and then they look back on that experience when they don't get admitted, or even if they do get admitted, and they just feel like, wow, I spent a lot of time focused on this.
And the one asterisk I'll put to that, and you and I have talked about this, is I actually think it is good for even eighth or ninth graders to look at a college application and to see the essays, because I've seen the other side where a lot of kids get to their junior, senior year and they look at it and they're like, I know I've had a moment where I've challenged authority, but I just can't think of it right now.
Right.
And if you have those essays with you, then sometime in the end of your sophomore, you're like, wait, I'm challenging authority right now. Let me put this in my mental bank. Or maybe I should challenge authority and not be afraid to. So I think, but yes, I agree. You shouldn't engineer things in a way that's artificial to you, but it is good to know what might be coming down.
Yeah, because I mean, some colleges are asking about a failure you've had and a risk
Mhm.
you've taken and things like that, and it might spur you to take more risks and
Exactly. And
be
have more failures. I think it's great.
willing to fail. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Jim, do you think the kind of the prevalence of early decision applications and kind of the process being earlier and earlier has changed that dynamic at all? I mean, what's your take on that?
It's funny. So I'm a big fan of earlier education, so meeting the students in that 8th, 9th, 10th grade, because it's not just, what might I have to write about someday, but it's also, if I aspire to go to U Chicago or Yale or Stanford, wherever, well, then I better be on the right math track, because I need my senior year, I need to have this level of competence, so the gap in where do I need to end up, for whether it's socioeconomic or where you live or whatever, can be pretty high. And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of that earlier in engagement. But at the same time, I'm also a fan of, okay, some kids do know where they want to go, and why not get it out of the way and make them happy? I mean, I see these kids who it's now February and they still haven't found their college home, who are seniors, and their families are becoming very agitated, and and the students are becoming very concerned. And so, like U Chicago, we just launched last year, just out of the blue, a early summer school early notification, so that the kids who came in the summer could apply. And it was always because I thought, oh geez, the kids that I'm going to admit, why am I waiting until December? If they know they want to come and they apply ED1, I still can't tell them to December. Why not just get it out of the way in September? So I'm already admitting some students. They call it ED0, but it is called summer school early notification. And from my standpoint, I'm like, those kids are making more informed decisions. They've already been on campus for 3 weeks. And we have programs that are fully free for students, and of course the paid ones. So it gives them a nice sense of what things are like. And so I am not a fan, however, of the students who are like, I have to apply somewhere early, even I wonder where it's going to be. That's not how the process is supposed to work. It's supposed to be like through thoughtful, interactions, or if I don't have a lot of money going online and watching our videos, I figured out which school feels like the right vibe for me. I'm going to apply to that one and get it out of the way. Not just, hey, I want to use this as the biggest lever or the biggest, advantage.
I've been thinking about it in this kind of idea of epiphany, not strategy, right?
Yes.
Like,
And Epiphany comes early, right before Christmas.
I,
So I feel like it works that way.
I what I'm a little on the fence. I want 100% because look, Brendan, you and I, we've advised a lot of students, and unfortunately it does, some schools have EA, some have restrictive EA, some have ED, and you do look at, and Jim wouldn't do this, but many of his peers are doing a lot of what I would call yield management. And it 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 does feel to me like someone who does, I play Uncle Sal a lot and I try to advise our juniors and our seniors. And there is a little bit of strategizing of, hey, it looks like there's a better shot to get ED. Actually, I'm curious, Brennan and Jim, what y'all think about that? Because I have sometimes counseled kids, you know, Brennan, we see it at KLS a lot of times, we'll have like 8 kids all apply to this one school that they all have put on a pedestal, and it's sometimes even harder to get in on, say, EA, and then they're scrambling later on. And I do maybe if some of them did apply ED some other places instead of just going to that one school, that maybe they would have better chances and have better outcomes. But I'm not the expert here, but I have gone through this process with a lot of kids.
yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, I think increasingly when you have the acceptance rates being so different between early decision and regular, if a student can make that decision early, then it's in their best interest to do so, right? And so I, I, I would be silly to say don't apply early. I think it's more at the beginning of the process, rather than go searching, like Jim was saying, go searching for early decision school. Really kind of look at schools and hopefully something hits you. And
Mhm.
and if and more and more I think we're telling students, if you get to the place and you have kind of 3 top schools, maybe do some of the hard work on the front end to see if one of those schools stands out and apply early, right?
Mhm.
If all else being equal, you would go to any of them and be happy, then it is in your best interest at some schools to apply early.
Mhm.
So the whole reason we have all around, like me, U Chicago, we believe in the free market at U Chicago. So I have every round, early action, early decision, you name it. But actually, one of the reasons we went with ED0 was I did kind of like, hey, here's the students who really wanted U Chicago, and we're not going to admit them. I should tell them before the ED1 deadline so they can think about
Mm.
schools and have that. And so while I am a big fan of the when the students use ED because they knew that that's what who they wanted. I'm also not, I don't have any problem with the student who narrows it down the way you just described to 3 schools. They're all great schools and they can't quite figure out, well, then a little strategizing about which one, I would be happy at all 3, which round at which school is going to, optimize my chances of getting to at least one of those 3, because now there's a lot of us who have 4 and 5% admit rates.
Well,
Mhm.
and to your point, Sal, I mean, the idea of kind of non-attachment and the fact that maybe getting to the point where you just realize that, no one school is going to be perfect, right? And so if you go into it saying, I'm going to apply early decision to this school, and if I get in, I'm going to make the most of it. It's what you make of where you go, I think is the point. Um, there's a question here in the Q&A. Are you seeing a trend, maybe Jim, I don't know, maybe both of you, are you seeing a trend where younger students are opting more and more for online schools? Are you seeing that more in your applicant pool, Jim?
I mean, more than I used to, but that's still a really small number. So I would say, sure, there are, it used to, you never saw it, and now you see it, but it's still a very small percentage of our applicant pool. Sal, I mean, you might even know the stats, but I don't.
Oh, I don't know the stats, but look, I think in the past there weren't a lot of high quality online schools, but now I think they've become an outlet for some kids who are geographically in a place where they don't have, truly world class access. We obviously have this partnership with Arizona State University around Con World School, and the kids who are going there do fit into that category of, these are the types of kids that would apply to U Chicago, but many of them are, and it's not just kids in Arizona. The school's free to anyone in Arizona, but it's kids from all over the world who otherwise would not in their local area have access to a really world-class college preparatory, or even if they do, it's too traditional for them. These are kids who want a little bit more flexibility, agency. So I think that's where you're seeing a little bit of that trend towards some of these less standard models. But yeah, I think it's still a small percentage.
Thanks. So Jim, there's a couple questions that came in about in holistic admission, the role of letters of recommendation. It's the question is, do letters from academia versus businesses, like maybe an employer or something like that, versus, a politician or some VIP. Can you talk a little bit about that and what role that plays?
Sure. So the teacher recommendations are incredibly valuable, and so let me just say that. Counselor recommendations give us a lot of information just about the curriculum in the school, and so thank you, teachers and counselors, if there's any out there, for putting in the time to do that. An additional recommendation, I think, is really what you're asking me about, and where they might come from. So a lot of us are like one additional recommendation, one, because sometimes I'll get 30 recommendations and the file is just so thick and you can't get through it. So I never would advocate for that. But if you
The thicker the file, the thicker the student, right?
well, the harder it is to pick them up off the ground and put them on the admissions table, that's for sure. So if it's you had a job and you were just great at it, the boss your boss wanted to write in, that's very different. Or so it's these outside things. I guess the most important thing is the person should know the student. It shouldn't be just because you know their father or mother that I'm not admitting their mother or father. I'm admitting the student. And so I guess it doesn't matter who they are. If somebody has unique insights into the student, we're happy to read it. But if you don't know the student, please don't just feel, oh, I happen to know President Obama and he was at UChicago, so I'll ask him, but he's never met my child. That's not the best use of.
Right. Every once in a while, we've seen people even mess up where, the person really doesn't know them and somebody in their office is doing it. And so they screw up the name of the kid. And, you've probably gotten recommendations for you, right? Like recommending you for admission because they switch your name with the kid's name or, I've seen all kinds of stuff.
Kids' names or a kid that they recommended 2 years ago. My favorite one time, we had 8 kids apply from one school, and I think the teacher must have been writing them all at the same time. So all the recs came in, they were all identical. That didn't help.
So there's some other questions about because we were talking about early decision and acceptance rates. What's the best place, and maybe I'll start and then you can add kind of the best place to find stats on that, on how we would know the acceptance rate of early decision versus regular decision. I mean, you can go to any school's what's called the common data set, right? And look for like Google U Chicago common data set, and that will give acceptance rates based on the different plans, right?
Well, it's not required. It will be going forward, though. I think there were recent changes to what that requires schools to do. I always push back with this question, which I think is a stupid question. It's like, yes, if you actually followed the advice we were just talking about, which is go for the schools that you're interested in. I mean, yes, whether our admit rate in regular is 4 or 8, it's still less than in early, which is probably 12 or 16. But that's not why you should be deciding whether you're applying early decision or regular decision. You should be applying to those plans with the general understanding the early rounds have higher admit rates than the regular rounds. It doesn't matter what the exact percentage is. I mean, we have an overall 4% admit rate. If it were 3, should that make a difference? No, so I'm like, apply to the schools you want to apply to. And if you have a favorite, apply there early.
Yeah, because there are a bunch of questions also about your ED 0. I mean, the summer program, what the
that one's going to be different because these kids, they were on campus and we know them. We actually interacted with them. They have a grade from Chicago, so I know a little bit more about them than I do the norm. So I wouldn't be surprised if that admit rate, which I don't know yet. I wouldn't be surprised if it were Oh God, if it were 30 or 40%, I wouldn't be surprised, because these are kids who in the past would have applied ED, and we probably admitted them back then, and we're just kind of clumping them all together earlier.
Great, thanks. And there's a question here that I'll just answer. When would be the ideal time to ask for letters of recommendation? I mean, every school has different policies, but I would highly recommend that you ask for them in the junior spring, just to
Yes.
just to give teachers and counselors are going to write one anyway, but give teachers a kind of time to write. Some like to write over the summer, and to have a face-to-face conversation with that teacher, not to just send an email and say, "Will you write me a recommendation?" But again, around this idea of wanting kind, appreciative students, right, Jim? I mean, going to the teacher and saying, I would really appreciate your support, and this is why I think you'd be a good person to write for me, and doing that well ahead of time.
And give them your some bullets, so that, I mean, I'm sure no matter how great the kid is, you can't remember all the details of every student. Make it easy on the teacher. They have really tough jobs already. Laying on top of it, writing recommendations is a lot of extra.
Sal, there's a question here about students that are in high school, kind of before college, using LinkedIn. Do you recommend them building kind of a presence on LinkedIn and connecting with certain folks, or any thoughts on that?
I mean, only if it's forwarding something that they care about. So if they need to be on LinkedIn, maybe they're applying for jobs where the jobs are asking for a LinkedIn profile, or they really are trying to build a network of some kind. But I don't think it's a must have by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and definitely not a strategy for admission, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
I actually think it's a good idea for summer jobs, and to find potential internships in areas you're interested in, or even to connect with alumni. So to connect with, like, a Con Lab school, we often connect our students with our graduates who are off in different colleges, and it's a good way to connect with them, and see where they are and see what they're doing and things like
Yeah,
that.
use it if it's useful.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, all right. Other questions. Um, so here's a question. There's a lot of uncertainty regarding the future. Reflecting that, what has changed in college admissions? Is there maybe a little more emphasis on well-rounded students? Could that mean demonstrated a strong dedication to sports and arts instead of being a national champion? Any thoughts on that in kind of holistic review? I mean, there's often this question of, are you looking for well-rounded students? Are you looking for students who are pointy? That kind of thing, Jim.
I'll take the first blow. Sal, you may have some thoughts on this. And the reason I kind of wanted to jump in, because a lot of the things that we do with you, Sal, are things that I think are changing about the colleges and what we do, and what, the kinds of skills. The fact is, I think what has changed the most is not everyone's going to have the same job, or the kids are going to change their minds, or they're going to get into these fields, and well, hopefully they'll do really well, and then they'll want to go into another field, or they'll just, they change their minds. I think the world is not a place where you graduated, you worked for IBM for 35 years, you retired, and you went to your lake house. Like, that's not how I think the world works as much anymore. And so having things like dialogues, and having things like, the schoolhouse for tutoring, allows the students to explore more things. And I think that's how we have changed. We're much more global universities, where we kind of help our students go out and have a study abroad, or do something. We expose them to industries that they haven't even heard of. I mean, I'm first gen from Indiana. I mean, yeah, I knew there were doctors and lawyers, and then my father was an electrician. So okay, that was the gamut. And there's a lot of stuff. And some of these things, like we're doing this new thing around financial restructuring and AI and quantum, that wasn't even around 10 years ago. And so, I think what we have to adapt to the speed of change in the world.
Yeah. Sal, anything to add to that?
no, I think it's everything we've been saying. It's a, I think, KLS graduates about, well, it used to graduate about 19 students a year. Now it's up to 25. So it's not a huge school. And I think U Chicago has just passed MIT as the school that we've sent the most kids to.
Classic MIT. Sorry, Stu.
And and I think I can kind of broadly describe, I mean, everyone knows these kids went from KLS to U Chicago. And, one of them is this young woman who started this, and it's this public, so I don't think I'm,
Right.
she started this incredible guinea pig enclosure business, got to $1 million in revenue. It was profiled on CNBC. This was a second business. She started another like competitor to Spanx when she was in middle school, just because she couldn't afford, or Lululemon, and just because she couldn't afford it. And but this is like a young woman who like figured out suppliers in China. So that's one. I mean, I didn't know where she was going to go to school, but I was like, she's going to do something really fascinating with her life, and it would be silly if she doesn't, if these people don't see that. I'm glad Jim saw that. We've had one that is very, I would say very, we're talking about spiky, like deep STEM, publishing real papers type of intellect type of person. We've had, the leader for our basketball team last year who does a million other things. We have I mean, I could just keep going down the list. Someone has a very popular sports YouTube channel and I think this hopefully makes it a little bit tangible. Like, all of these people were doing what they were interested in. I can guarantee you that that the student who did this guinea pig enclosure business, she did not do it to get into college. She genuinely, I mean, I think it became so successful she even thought about whether she should go to college. But when you hit $1 million in revenue doing I was like, guinea pig, and she's like, it's a $4 billion market. I was like, no way. And then she gave me a presentation. I was like, oh, it is not guinea pig. All animal enclosures is apparently a $4 billion, and ancillary products is a $4 billion. Anyway, who would have thought? But yeah, I mean, hopefully that should, but all of these were very strong students. Not 1600s on SATs, not absolutely perfect, but strong enough that I think a Jim could see that, okay, they're going to be able to handle U Chicago just fine, but they're bringing something interesting. And once again, it's not a formula. Maybe if one year you got 30 people who started a guinea pig enclosure business, you're like, hey, I don't know if we need that many. We'll share them with the other universities.
Well, so Jim, to that point, I mean, there's a question here about alumni and from a school like Khan Lab School where we're mastery based, and I imagine you kind of watch student success from certain high schools, and as you go out, and what are you seeing there? What kind of trends do you see from schools that are mastery based?
Sure. So I think the most important thing to know about like how we think of schools as feeders or non-feeders is there's a lot of high schools out there and a lot of programs, if you think worldwide. And certainly there are schools where we just see a lot of kids, and a year in and year out, a significant number apply. We take a significant number, and those kids come and do really well. And so what you're getting, when I'm Harvard Westlake or Horace Mann or KLS. And what we see over and over again is these are kids who are they're playful with, like, they're open to ideas. They like ideas. That's kind of really important at U Chicago. They're hardworking. They're not afraid of hard work. That's another kind of U Chicago trait. And I would say it still opens the door for a good chunk of the class to be filled with kids who we get one applicant from that school every 5 years, but that every once in a while a kid comes out of the blue and you're like, that kid is amazing. And so yeah, I have a kid who is amazing right now, who he owns a lipstick, like a lip balm thing that he did with his sister, and they're from rural America, and at the same time he's got a podcast for helping other rural kids go to college. Like this, they come from everywhere.
Yeah. And there's a question here about given that you're suggesting there's no formula, is the advice that students should just do what they like? And I think the answer is yes, right? I mean, they really should, but they should do stuff. They should take risks and they should try things and they should, right, not just um, sit on the couch. They should explore their interests.
The whole reason I'm so excited about the things we do with you, Sal, it's both, hey, here's something you can do. And I think everything we do with you is both, it's great for the person who's doing it, but it also has like a social good, or it like helps other kids learn how to do math, or it helps other students who have different backgrounds, get be ready for what it's like to be on a college campus where you are going to run into people who are very different from you. And I can't thank you enough for supplying that and supplying it for free, which is even better, for students, because I think the kids who are in really well-resourced areas of the country or the world, this comes to them, it's part of the grade school they go to. And you're kind of democratizing these opportunities, which has been so great for you, Chicago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll just throw out, a lot of the theme of today's conversation, a lot of it is like, oh, there's no formula, and you got to find what you're passionate about. But some of these programs like Schoolhouse.world, tutoring, I think people know, Jim talked about you want kind students. A lot of schools already require you to do things like community service hours. And look, I'll be honest, when I did community service, I was part of the Key Club, and it wasn't like the thing I spiked in high school. I was just kind of calling it in, or I kind of just did it as a social thing. There were other kids I wanted to hang out. I mean, I actually did gain something from it. I don't want to be completely cynical about it. But I think what's exciting about things like tutoring on Schoolhouse is it's there was a student who they sent us at Schoolhouse a letter saying, I showed up here to go to the tutor training because I read that MIT was taking it, but I can't fake this. Like, I have to really be invested in it. And we see time, there's not a student there who's run 20, 30, 40 tutoring sessions, has a high tutor rating, who isn't the kid that you wouldn't want to work with or have on your college campus. In fact, I talked to a very large financial firm. They said that when they have 20 job openings, they get 20,000 applicants. So even more competitive than a lot of these college. And I said, what if I could show, and actually this entity funds Schoolhouse.world. They philanthropically fund some of the work we're doing. And I said, well, if I were to show you someone who's not only certified in statistics or calculus, but has run 30 tutoring sessions and has a 4.9 out of 5.0 tutor rating, wouldn't you want them at your firm? They're like, absolutely. Like, that's because we get a lot of smart people, and they need to be smart, but they need to be able to communicate. They need to be able to show leadership. So I do think it's not a silver bullet, but I think, being able to be very active on these types of platforms is a very strong signal. Same thing with the dialogues. If students are able to have 10, 20 dialogues, these are not easy things to do. It is uncomfortable to have a conversation with someone that you really don't get their point of view, especially something you're passionate about. But if you're able to do that, I'll let Jim speak for it, but like, I would really value that person at my company, firm, community. I'll tell you one other example of, there's a young woman, I find this very inspiring. Grew up in a Kabul, couldn't go to school. Her name's Fatima. She's told me I could tell the story. I met her recently, but never went to school. Khan Academy was her school. She's a refugee in Pakistan, still never went to school. Learns everything off of Khan Academy, decides she wants to go to MIT, and MIT is like, it's very impressive, but you have no college, you have no high school transcript, you have no SAT scores, you have no AP. What do we do with you? They told her about Schoolhouse.world. She went and certified in calculus and became a tutor, and they admitted her. And I just met this young woman. My wife and I took her to her local Indian restaurant a couple of months ago out here in California, because she was out here for this OpenAI Y Combinator, like the top AI people in the country, and she was just a freshman. She was here for that, and she's like, "Oh yeah, Elon Musk was speaking, but I skipped that to go have dinner." I'm like, "No, you should have gone to the Elon Musk." But it just gives you a sign that I do think people should value these things, and it's great to see that Jim and others have been valuing it.
Absolutely. All right, so we are getting to the end of our hour here, and I want to end with one question for both of you, the same question, and it came in earlier, and it was from a parent um, asking for you to provide any tips for a parent who wants to help with the process. but also allow the students to own the process and tell their own story. Any tips for how they might do that? Jim, you want to start?
Sure. I guess first I would say parents, I know this is an anxious time, and so I think one of the biggest pieces of advice is just pick one day of the week that you talk about college with your child. Maybe it's a day you already hate, and just make that the extra, thing that is hard on that day. And because I think the kids, the more you talk about it, it just ratchets up the stress. And this is also a special time for the kids, and so I would highly recommend, maybe it's the junior spring before you start visiting schools or before you start the conversations in earnest, to sit down with your child and just tell them you love them and that you're proud of them and that you are however this process plays out, that's not going to change. And because I think they really do worry about that. Other than that, put your child out front, let them take the lead on the interactions. We are not applying to college. Your child is applying to college. Those kinds of small things.
Thank you. Sal, bring us home here.
Yeah, and look, I'm always afraid to give parenting advice because I'm literally in the middle of it, and we'll see what how much control or influence we really have, but I try my best to nudge, but not make it feel overbearing at all. I feel very fortunate. My son's 16, so he's in the on ramp right now. He's a junior. We now go to the gym together twice a week. We're pumping iron. It feels,
Yeah, I was noticing that, Sal.
for me or for Imran. I
Oh,
mean,
for you. I mean,
no, I've been doing it for years. I'm far stronger than most people think. But look, our gym, our Y is about half a mile from our house. So we walk together, we chat about all sorts of stuff. But every now and then, and look, I try to not fixate on it myself. And I will be honest, a little part of me sometimes, I do kind of imagine, but I'm like, no, it's not my thing. I'm not going to project onto him. And honestly, he could be happy at so many different places. And I see people who even go to some of the top places, but if they're going with the wrong mindset, they can be very miserable there. And look, I've seen even in my family and beyond, especially now with social media and like if honestly, I will be very grateful if my kids grow up, have solid mental health, don't feel too stressed or anxious, find a good community, hopefully life partner, and have a sense of purpose and meaning. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you went to whatever U.S. News and World Report thinks is near some top list, or which is super silly. But yeah, when we're walking, every now and then I'm like, oh, have you thought about this? Hey, you might maybe want to take a look at some of these. We had a train ride over, and I was like, hey, you might want to just download what some of these essays look like and take a look at them. And I was prepared. He's like, no, I want to go play a video game. I would have said fine, but he's like, oh, that's a good idea. Let me look at that. I'm like, oh, okay. So I just try to throw some ideas, or he's really into piano. And I'm like, yeah, look, there might be he's like composing music. I'm like, that's great, you do it, but he's like very private about it. Like he doesn't want to show anyone. And I'm like, well, Imran, I know you might want to show people. Like, I think maybe you record. Well, I don't know, but I just throw out ideas, and if they resonate with him, they resonate. But both my wife and I, we don't try to be overbearing or over directive about it at all.
Well, and that's really well said, and I'll kind of connect those two ideas because I got to the point when my son is now a senior in college, and he was looking at schools during the pandemic, and we got to the place where he finally called me out because I was really hands off, but every time we go out on a walk, I would bring it up. And so great to talk about it when you're on a walk or doing something like that, but just make sure it's not every time, like Jim said. You limit it to maybe once a walk. Because finally my son just laughed, and I said, "What?" And he said, I was just waiting for, how far into the walk it was going to be until you brought it up. So
See, the good thing is I have a rotation of topics that my wife and I decided that we need to talk to our children about.
oh,
And so-
game on. Well, thank you both for spending time, and thanks for everyone who attended. We are next month we're going to have Juan Espinoza from the Virginia Tech, and he's going to talk about AI and how they're using AI to read essays and some of those different things. And speaking of AI, I want to share, and maybe Sal, you can just talk about this really quickly. I want to share this event that's happening at Khan Lab School. It's the AI in Education Summit, and it's Sal's going to be one of the speakers, and it's November 1st from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Anything you want to add there, Sal?
No, it's should be a fun day. The team at Khan Lab School has organized it, and it's the first one they're doing. And so yeah, if you happen to be in the area, it could be fun.
Yeah, we'll send some more information out about it. So thank you both, and have a great night.
Great.
Thank you. Great seeing you.
Thank y'all.
You too.
Bye-bye.